This episode of Legacy Curious is brought to you by Legacy Protectors. Customize insurance strategies for business owners and families who aspire to create a lasting legacy. Hello there, and welcome to Legacy Curious, the show where we explore what it really means to protect, grow, and pass on everything you've worked so hard to build. I'm your host, David Gravelle, life insurance strategist, business legacy coach, and founder of Legacy Protectors. Here, every episode, I sit down with trailblazers, entrepreneurs, and everyday visionaries who are turning their values into lasting impact in business, in life, and across generations. Whether you're building a business, preparing for retirement, or simply thinking about what kind of legacy you want to leave behind, you're in the right place. Let's get curious and let's get to work building our legacy. Today's guest is Meg Manazir. Meg blends nearly 2 decades of corporate tech experience, a desire to share what she's learned, and a love for working with really good humans into a consultancy that is all about accelerating ambition. Ambitious women and brands that give a damn come to her when they're ready to stop circling their potential and get shit done. As an accelerator for your ambition, Meg works to amplify what's already working, light a fire under what's next, and turn ideas into impact. She'll help by sharpening your message, finding door-opening opportunities, and doing the work to ensure that you command the attention you deserve. She's lived abroad, taught Pilates, provided wellness coaching, mentored, and been mentored by amazing humans. She's delivered strategic, impactful communications for Microsoft and other global companies. Meg mixes humor and a tell-it-like-it-is delivery to build people up while creating positive, meaningful environments in all aspects of her life. Let's say hello to Meg Manazir and learn about her legacy. Well, welcome, Meg, to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for joining us. I'm very happy to have you. Excited to get to know you. And tell us where you're joining us from. Let's give our audience an idea of where you're calling in from.
Yeah, I'm calling in from Bellevue, Washington today, just outside of Seattle. And we actually have sunny, bright blue skies, upper 70s, which is kind of rare for us. So an unusual Bellevue, Washington, if you will.
Great, good. So let's start just by finding out where you grew up. Is that where you grew up, and what was your young life like?
Yeah, no, actually, I grew up as a military kid. My father was a naval aviator and then went on to command aircraft carriers. So we bounced between the East and West Coast. I was actually born in San Diego. And when I was in, the summer before 5th grade, we moved to the DC area, the Pentagon's there. We ended up moving back to Southern California, to Southern Virginia, to the Pentagon, and then I went to the University of Washington in Seattle. And my first go around in Seattle, I didn't do it right. Here, it's all about the outdoors. It's so beautiful here. And I wasn't as invested in that. So I moved to San Francisco and then to Helsinki, Finland. And I know we'll talk about some of that, but I came back to Seattle not planning to stay, and here I am 10 years later. I've now done it right, outdoors all the time.
Yeah, great. So that must have shaped you as a person quite a bit by moving around, experiencing different cultures, different cuisines, different lifestyles. Talk a bit about that and how that made you the person you are today, gave you resilience, let's say, or other things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it helps that we moved a lot when I was younger. It's certainly not the same story as every other military kid, which is every 2 years. But the moving does something in you that just makes you look forward. So think about it this way. If you are leaving your 6th grade friends and going to 7th grade in a new state, if you look back and think about those 6th grade friends, it's very sad. So you learn how to look forward and you learn how to plan. And that ended up being something that happened when I moved to different states and then also internationally. And I'm a really big fan of living outside of your home country. I think it's tremendous to understand a different culture, to get a different way of life. It's different than spending a week or a month there. Like actually being immersed in the culture, going to the grocery stores, seeing how people live gives you a like curiosity and a deep appreciation for the fact that there are so many different ways to be human. And I bring that look forward and I bring that curiosity into my career in a lot of ways. And I think that's been very helpful as I've jumped to a bunch of different things. I'm always looking for what's next and always trying to build something that doesn't exist. So with some of those tenets, it really does help as I've been advancing in various stages of my career.
Oh, we're kindred spirits because I couldn't, you've said it very well there. That's exactly the way that I live my life for the last 40 years or so. It's just been looking for that next adventure, finding new opportunities to experience this planet and the people on it. I've grown richer from it. I've become much more compassionate towards my fellow humans on the planet. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, you can't substitute that by, in any other way. So I encourage everyone to get out and travel and learn about the world. So, speak to more about maybe the mission that as a child of a military person, did you feel that sense of purpose and servitude to the country and to something greater? Was that, how did that translate into that second generation?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, neither my brother nor I went military. So we got to see firsthand what it was like, but not having gone through it ourselves. Our father knew what he wanted to do when he was 14. So this sense of drive and ambition, and I mean, to the point where he went to his guidance counselor and figured out how do I get to the Naval Academy, wanted to be naval aviator, went and did all of that stuff. So this put your mind to it purpose has been drilled into us since we were younger. Our mom too, same thing. She's a very driven human. And there's an interesting thing about being a military kid that is different than my partner who didn't grow up military. There's a lot of structure that I grew up with. It's you get out of bed, you make your bed kind of household. It is you pick up after yourself household. It is if you say you're going to be there at a certain time, you're there 2 minutes earlier household. And those are all wonderful things to be able to bring into your career. Even think about something like making a bed. Automatically, you've done that and you've checked off one task on your to-do list. Like, what a great way to start your day. Sure. There's also an element of achievement in there. So the purpose piece, but this idea of if our dad was out flying, he was in wars, he was out to sea, and it was always something he was doing for the country. And it was always, how do I get to the next thing that I can do more for our country? And that became something super important to us in terms of things like education. So how can you get the best out of your education? And sports, like how can you perform? So those two things are pretty critical in navigating a corporate tech career. Certainly the education, certainly the performance. And the other thing that's maybe a little unusual is growing up as a military kid. I think the thing that probably helped me the most in my career is understanding that leaders are humans. So military is super hierarchical. And I had a lot of exposure to some very senior leaders. And in fact, probably more than once, my dad was the director of air shows for a little bit. And we actually had some Blue Angels stay over at our house. And when you have the Blue Angels staying and they're eating breakfast with you or doing whatever, you realize they're also humans. They put on their pants the same way. They have a lot of similarities. And I worked with a lot of executives. Actually, most of my career was executives. And that experience and that exposure really helped me realize that, yes, I absolutely have the respect and the deference. But at the end of the day, you're a human too. You've been in my shoes. And it helped me not to walk in with trepidation. And it created a little bit, a lot of it, more open-mindedness and comfort right from the get-go of any executive engagement.
Yeah, exactly. You're able to see them as humans first. And I think that's a great quality. And now this must have been pre-Top Gun days, right? Your dad was probably one of the people that the show tried to capture. Is that accurate? Yeah.
It's actually my parents were pretty young when they had me. So he was in Top Gun when they were filming it. His squadron flies in it. And I remember multiple times just going, is this what his life is like? As I got older and you see the volleyball scenes and all of these things. And sure enough, yes, it is. So Top Gun in the 80s, very much like the movie. And a lot of my friends Everybody remembers my dad for that, and they're always like,
Sure.
"Oh, Top Gun." But yes,
Right.
that was pretty accurate from what I understand.
Yeah, what a recruitment ad that turned out to be. So okay, so you didn't choose a military life. What did you study, and what it sounds like tech was in there, but what was your formal education like, and then tell us about some of your early career choices.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did something very different from my dad and went into university not having any clue what I wanted to do. I'm a person who gets pretty excited about certain topics and I follow that excitement, I follow that energy. And I went as a student at the University of Washington, going into my senior year, I still had no idea what I wanted to do. It's an interesting thing when you have a father who has, purpose. He's had
He
a
had
purpose his
purpose
whole
at
career.
14, right?
Yeah,
From 14, he
exactly.
knew exactly what he was. He was formed and whole at 14.
Yes.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. I
yeah.
was definitely
What a
not formed
gift.
and whole at 20.
Right,
So
right, right. What a gift for some people. Yeah, definitely.
yeah. Yeah. So one of the things I did, I was doing a lot of work in communications and rhetorical studies as my minor, so public speaking. And the irony, which we'll get into, is that I spent most of my career on the back end helping public speakers. But I did a couple of public relations classes just because I had no idea what the discipline was. And it was an absolutely terrible education because all we did was research for our professor's books that we were never credited in. I did have an opportunity to do an informational interview with a PR firm. And I walked out of that. They called me the next day and offered me a paid internship. And you don't say no to that.
Sure.
So and this is, I think of it as like the career guardian angels. This is when they really started. And I started on the Starbucks account and then very quickly transitioned to the Microsoft account and spent the majority of my couple of decades career working with or for Microsoft in some capacity.
Right. So very tech adjacent, if not directly involved with Microsoft.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward a bit, and you're gathering momentum in your career, life experience, and the pandemic hits. So talk about what that was like for you, and specifically how it altered your career, and what are the things that you were doing during that time.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think of the pandemic as the nexus of multiple pieces of my experience. So if I go back a bit in time, when I started on the Microsoft account, I was fairly young in my career, and we ended up building the crisis communications and news agenda platform that the company still uses today. So started that pretty young, moved over to doing event production, so very logistics focused, getting comfortable with stages and executives and things of that nature. And then moved to Helsinki to work for Nokia. And when I was doing my interview with my hiring manager at Nokia, I joked with him that I had to move across the world to not work for Microsoft. Well, turns out that I ended up working for 2 years on the acquisition of our part of Nokia, so Nokia phones. So my team was working on essentially those pieces. And I spent then all of my time focused on Microsoft in tandem and in transition with Nokia. And I came back to the States and I did digital programming, so blog and social. And then I went to work for the gentleman who led artificial intelligence and research for Microsoft at the time. And this time I'm a full Microsoft employee coming back to the States. And prior I was in an agency capacity. And when we were doing this work with the AI and research, it was at the very beginning stages of, we'll say, consumers' awareness of AI.
Right.
And my role was to start to talk about it and help people understand what it was. And in that process, I also started learning how to do technical keynotes and working with executives on highly technical content. And then I moved over to a Microsoft advertising team and worked with 3 different corporate vice presidents on their executive platforms and wrote the organization's story. So I say all of that because every single one of those experiences was relied on during the pandemic. So I remember we were actually, we were, I don't know, 2 days maybe from getting on a plane to go to Atlanta in 2020 for our annual global summit. No, I'm working for a sales team. They are party people. We have planned this whole
We
thing
are.
in months. Yeah, in
Yeah.
months of
Work
planning.
hard, play hard. Yeah.
Yeah,
Same thing.
exactly. And we make the call to stop the global offsite. We already have people who are on flights to come to Atlanta. We were going to be in Atlanta at that point, although I was based in Redmond. And very quickly, we pivoted from a week-long event to a digital event that took all of the elements of the keynotes and the speakers and just really just condensed it. And it turns out that our event on March 4th or 6th of 2020 was the very first time that Microsoft had done anything like that digital production at scale. And it's a model that the company then continued to utilize and still does to this day. And, so technical keynotes in there, crisis communications in there, executive work in there, and you have the pandemic. And then at the same time, there's a lot of other stuff happening around the world. You have situations of racial and social injustice. You have decisions about women's health coming down. You have the war in Ukraine. A lot is happening. And from an employee perspective, how do you do your job and understand how to be a human in the world and have those feelings? And so a lot of the experiences I had at that time working outside of the country and working with global audiences and global colleagues, I was able to bring this curiosity, which we talked about earlier, and this humanity to the work, to communicating like that. And I mean, we brought that media training that I did, we brought that in, we brought the digital and blog stuff in. So all of these things really just came together into this role.
Okay, so we have some overlap with your career at Microsoft and my career at Microsoft. Now, it sounded like you worked on the Microsoft phone. That was a Nokia, and then the acquisition, and then that all went away because you can't buy a Microsoft phone today. And I worked on the HoloLens product line, and that's what brought me to Microsoft. That was a culmination of my career path. And so, tell me what happens when all these changes are going on and you're having to manage that yourself. Did you build up that muscle enough? I mean, you had all of those changes in your life, so you're pretty good at that. But, how does a career of change, and especially some abrupt ones, how did that bring about your skill set today and what you're trying to bring to help others do in the same situation, maybe live through that and prosper through that?
Yeah, absolutely. If there's one constant in our lives, it's change. And as a young employee in the world, you create something, you put it out, and then you cringe when something changes. You're like, oh, I worked so hard on that. Why is somebody tearing it apart? And as you go through different stages of your career, you recognize that everything is subject to change at any point in time. And the work that I did, to your point, a lot of it was at the 11th hour. You just throw out whole plans or, a speech you've been working on for months. I remember actually a year prior to leaving Microsoft, I had been working on a speech for an executive in Dubai. Well, that executive left Microsoft and I had to pivot for another executive within a week's time and create the new designs for it, prep them, train them, get all the logistics. So you don't know what's coming. And I think that element of change is really something that it actually shows up in two of the parts of my business. My consultancy has a couple of tenets. One of those is business mentoring for women in corporate, specifically that corporate focus, and then business strategy and storytelling. In both of those aspects, the comfort of change, the comfort with change is essential for growth. So from a business mentoring in corporate, you're a corporate employee. At the end of the day, well, if you're working for a for-profit company, at the end of the day, the responsibilities are to the shareholders. The employees help the company get there, but the company is shareholder first. So that means employee things are going to change. Reorganizations are going to happen. Products, to your point, HoloLens and Microsoft Phone are going to go away. Lots of stuff is going to happen. And your opportunity and growth is how to keep stability when everything feels like it's earthquaking and still continue to grow. And so I work with a lot of women in that capacity. So how do you continue to move forward? And especially in tech right now, there are a lot of layoffs. There's a lot of uncertainty. So how do you perform at your best despite that happening? And then in the business strategy and storytelling space, it's all about story. It's all about strategy, right? So the strategy, if you nail your strategy, an excellent one, is going to be in place for a little while. It doesn't mean it doesn't change a little bit, but you're going to have it in place for a little while and then you change it. If you don't change your strategy, you're not keeping up with the advancements in technology in this case. And then from a storytelling perspective, your story changes every time you go to a new audience. The core of it is the same, but you're tweaking it for the audience, for what it is they're going to care about, what's in it for them. So that really shows up. And I think as employees today, if we don't have the skill set to manage change, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to grow. It's very difficult to be a human in corporate if change really throws you off balance. So it ends up coming into every single thing I do.
Yeah, I have to commend you for that, because it is a superpower or a differentiator between candidates. When you're hiring and you have someone who is adept at changing, their work behaviors, their skill set to match the challenges, well, that employee is going to outperform, an equal skill set employee. So, yeah, definitely a very top of mind skill that is much needed today. So, is that what some of the conversations that you're having at the PNW kitchen table community that you've developed and are leading? Tell us about that.
Yeah, thank you. The PNW kitchen table, it's just I'm really happy that this exists in the world. So the PNW Kitchen Table is a community for high achieving women in the Pacific Northwest to grow professionally and personally. It's the only platform of its kind that covers professional and personal. And the reason why I say that is because we are whole humans. When you go to your laptop in the morning, or I go to my laptop in the morning, we don't stop being humans. We don't stop having families. We don't stop worrying about things. So if you have an environment with high achieving women and you ask them to just focus on one aspect of their lives, you miss out on so much more. So the community is focused on that, and just in its essence, change is a core part of it. It's really fascinating to see what the women in the community are working on, and we have folks that cover all kinds of experiences and corporate tech, lawyers, architects. We have a former CIA agent in there, all therapists, all kinds of folks. And where it came from actually is maybe a little bit of lucky happenstance. For years prior to the pandemic, I would host a pizza night monthly or every 2 months at my house. And I'd bring women from work, women from university, women I'd stayed friends with after relationships ended. And I'd provide the dough and the mozzarella. They would come with the toppings. And it was a powerhouse gathering. And it's just women that I liked,
Yeah.
And they would leave and I would get texts going, oh my gosh, that was fantastic. I was so glad I met so and so. There were business arrangements that came out of that, deeper friendships. It was incredible. And then we paused during the pandemic, right? After the pandemic, we ended up moving to a house that had more space. And I actually thought, well, maybe I should fill it, make it feel like a home, fill it with amazing women.
Yeah.
So I started hosting these pizza nights again. And one of those nights, a girlfriend of mine, a very close girlfriend of mine, was like, how does this get bigger? Like, what do we do? How do we make this scale?
Right.
And at that point, we probably had 15 women that were coming, which is pretty great turnout.
Sure.
And a couple months, I put that in the back of my head. And a couple months later, I was listening to an online conference. And I never had time to learn when in my corporate career. It was your schedule is not your own. There are a million things that are needed from you. So spending an hour on learning felt like just a luxury. Yeah. So I'm sitting here learning about content creation, and I'm a builder. I love building things. So when people were talking about building content, I was just like, how do you do it? Well, they started talking about building platforms. And by the second speaker, similar topic, I thought, maybe I do that with pizza nights. And a couple weeks later, I launched the PNW Kitchen Table. Now I will tell you, as a professional communicator, one of my skills is not naming. So if I had to go back and do it again, I'd probably name it something different. But the ethos of it is that it's people around my kitchen table. So change is, and actually I'll say this, that we had a coffee meeting this morning. 10 women showed up, and they're all, middle of a Friday workday. And they're all facing some sort of change, new careers, new projects in their work world, new programs as entrepreneurs. And every single one of them, as I look around the table, I realize you've become adept at change. That's why you've been so successful.
So I think that name does capture it. If I could give you maybe just a little encouragement on that kitchen table name, because sometimes it is a workspace,
Yeah.
Most times it is a community area for people to come and break bread and to connect. And I think, you're trying to capture both in that essence. So I think you've done it there. So I'll encourage you to kind of keep that name. I think it works.
Thank
Um,
you.
so tell us how that kind of leads into the storytelling, because it seems like that's where stories are shared. Some stories they aren't articulated until the first time at a kitchen table because people are asking you what happened, and it may be the first time you're telling it. And how does that translate into your career story for a person?
Yeah. Yeah. It is really amazing what happens when you're sitting around a kitchen table and sharing food. Food is a universal communicator, or connector, excuse me. And people open up and share things that they wouldn't otherwise. It does help when we have wine and cocktails, I will say, but the storytelling that is evident at these kitchen table events or even at my house, I still host pizza nights. There's a little bit of carryover the kitchen table, but not totally. That storytelling ends up turning into programs. So, for example, I told you I'm a builder. I'm just about to do the first of a series of events that's all about candid conversations, talking about the things that we're talking about around a literal kitchen table with a bigger audience. The content for the series, it's called Poppy Candid. The content for the series comes from conversations around my kitchen table. And in this case, later in June, we are talking about what to do when the world is shifting, how to navigate your career when the world is shifting around you. And it's real conversation. It's none of this pre-planned, pre-seeded language. It's people from very different industries talking about what their experience is in that space. And so the story ends up turning into that. And the nature of the story is that it's inherently shareable. So the women who attend that event, and a lot of the work, most of the work I do is focused on women, they continue to tell that story, and it gives them opportunity to voice their own stories. And that piece I think is really special.
Yeah. So how would people get involved in that, Meg? What's the outreach like for? And it sounds like it's trying to scale. Is it nationwide? Is everyone welcome? Like, tell us about that. How they get involved. What do they
Yeah,
find?
so right now it's pretty regionally focused. When I launched the PNW Kitchen Table, there was terrific reception out the bat, and I have a number of folks who have reached out and said, "Can you please come to Minneapolis? Can you please come to New York? Can you please come to San Francisco?" And I figured what I do is try and test and break the PNW Kitchen Table here in our region and then scale it. That'd be incredible to scale it. That said, I do have members I've got one in North Carolina, I've got one in Colorado. We have a couple folks who are in different areas of the country who join, and they just join for the virtual part. So we do in person and virtual events. And those people that are not in the region or maybe can't attend an in person event, even if they're locally here, can join any of the virtual conversation or events. And then Poppy Candid, which is that storytelling extension I was talking about, that's also very specifically regionally focused because we want it in person. We have all been sitting behind a screen for so long. A lot
Right.
of us have gotten rusty. And the idea is to bring a group of women into this space in real life to say hello face to face. And I mean, of course, somebody who's not in the Seattle area can come, but it requires travel. So
Sure.
very regionally focused.
Yeah.
One day, it would be fantastic to scale these things. And once that time comes, we should chat.
Yeah. Good. Good. Well, we'll have you back on for sure at that point. Um, Last piece here before we move on to what you're doing now and how people can get in touch with you. Talk to us a bit about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship, and the value of each one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a couple of core players in a successful career. Two of those are the mentorship and sponsorship. Um, and I'm a huge advocate for both of them. So I'm a professional mentor, although professional is funny, there's not a certification for mentorship
Right.
like there is coaches. But part of my role is mentorship. And mentorship is all about having somebody in your corner with you. They're sharing their perspective, they're helping you work through a specific challenge, they're rolling up their sleeves, they could be emotional support for you. They are there in the thick of it with you, kind of a buddy in some kind of solution focused work. A sponsor, on the other hand, is someone who can advocate for you when you're not in the room. So think of this as your skip level leader or somebody who's in your peer set but might be at different tables. So they're able to, from a bird's eye view, understand what it is you do, the characteristics, and why you'd be great at something. They are also the person that says, "Hey, have you thought of David?" And those people are pretty critical because they're usually at higher levels of an organization. They often have the ear of more senior leaders. And if you put those two in tandem, you put them together and combine their powers. You've got a leader who's working with you. Leader can be anybody. It doesn't have to be an actual leader. We have opportunities to be leaders every single day. So somebody in a leadership capacity working with you as a mentor day in and day out. And then somebody over here speaking your name at a table. It's like the dynamic duo of growth. And both of these people, because of how they know you, how they work with you, end up being what I think of as stepping stones to different parts of your career, or maybe door opener people who can open this door that you didn't think existed and help you go down a different path.
Wow, that's fantastic to share, because I'm trying to find people that will do both on this channel, frankly. Like, this is I think one of the powerful parts of what I'm trying to build here is to have people come on and say someone else's name when they're not in the room, because they found them here, or they met them through a connection from here. So, that's a great way to consider, combining the two as someone who is going to help you in your career and someone who's going to help you in that next part of your career, let's say, right? To find a new opportunity. Okay, great. So tell us a bit about your consulting firm, Meg. What does it look like to work with you, and who are the people that would get the most value from your services?
Yeah, so I work primarily with ambitious women, which is career-minded, growth-minded women. And
you're speaking to them now. They're listening. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And then great brands, like brands who care. And my consultancy has a couple of pieces: the business mentoring that we were talking about, and the business strategy and storytelling. This work comes from a nearly 2-decade career in corporate tech. I'll tackle the business mentoring first. So I don't know if I look short or tall on a screen, but I am 5'3" on a tall day. I have very visible tattoos and piercings. And for a lot of my career, I was mistaken as the girl who gets the coffee. And I was often the one presenting or the one working directly with the executives in positions of, well, we'll say in positions that maybe surprised people.
So underestimated, overperforming all the time, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's a great spot to be in.
It sure is. Yeah.
Yeah. And then working in a global capacity, you take those characteristics and they really become something that you have to work with. And I'll give you an example. I went to Japan for a week a couple of years ago, and tattoos are associated with the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia. So we had to cover up in business environments. That's pretty challenging when it's 80 degrees. And so, getting pretty creative with that. But the learnings from each of these, like how to navigate the room, not only with who you are as a character and the description of you, but if you are not seen as a leader, what do you do? And I developed a toolkit for how to navigate any situation, how to get along with people, what to do when you need to move something forward. I take all of that into the business mentoring work. And of course, the mentoring is focused completely on the person and what their goals are. But I end up being able to have these tools that I bring in and go, "Hey, should we try this out?" And so that's pretty fun, because I didn't have these experiences that I just put on a shelf and left them there. I'm able to take them and pay them forward. And then the business mentoring, the business strategy and storytelling comes from covering nearly every single aspect of communications. I've done basically everything except for analyst relations. And there are some clients I have where I get on the phone and talk strategy for an hour. What does it look like? How are you doing your marketing? Have you thought about the branding? How do they all connect? It's just a conversation about that. And then some that are full scale, you need to launch a product or land an important message or be on a keynote stage, and I work with them through that. There is also a lot of branding that I do with folks, and it's becoming ever more important for people to understand your story. And as I'm working with solopreneurs and businesses that are just launching, it's all about how can you articulate what you're doing so somebody else can speak about it to another person and helping them think about their stories. And maybe ironically, maybe not, the hardest thing for people to do is articulate their own stories.
Yeah, fair enough.
And that's
Yeah.
what work is.
Right. And we've had some guests on here that help in that way too, like help with finding your own voice. And I think that's a real important message to keep delivering, is that everyone has a story and they're worth telling. Keep working on it, audience members, if you're struggling, and reach out for help. So how do people get in touch with you? Where's a good place to go to learn more or to get connected with you?
Yeah, absolutely. The very best place is LinkedIn. I post on there a couple times a week. You understand what I stand for, what I talk about, get a sense of who I am, because the work that I do is so personal and it really makes a difference if you get along. So that is really a good place for who I am. And it has all of the links. There's a calendar link. My website is on there, which is just megmanazir.com. It's a little bit challenging sometimes to find me, so I'm glad we're going to put my name in writing. I am the only Meg Manazir in the world that I've found. I've had 41 years of research to test this out, so we'll see what happens. There is on LinkedIn a great, we'll call it, since we're talking stories, a great story about what I bring and what I offer and who I am as a person.
Okay, and we'll have all that in the description. So viewer, check it out in the description. And Meg, we're real excited to have you here today. So thank you. And now to the $1 million question, and why we ultimately wanted to know about you is, what is your legacy? What do you hope to be known for and leave behind?
Yeah, this is amazing. I would love to be an accelerator for ambition, meaning helping as many women and good humans as possible advance in their career and lives. You've got an idea, you are stuck in a tricky spot. How do I help you move it forward? And it's really, really focused on women, because I truly believe in the power of women. And when we put our minds to something, it's absolutely incredible what can be created.
And I agree wholeheartedly. I think as a society, we are underserved when we don't include women and listen to them and get them to express themselves fully. Frankly, we're just cheating ourselves. So we're going to keep delivering that message here. And we thank you for coming on today. And we're going to encourage you to come back and maybe speak to one or two topics that our women entrepreneurs and other business owners that are listening can take advantage of. So thanks for joining us today, Meg, and sharing with our audience.
Thank you so much, David, for the opportunity.
All right, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you to our listeners and audience for spending time with us today on Legacy Curious. I hope this conversation gave you some insight, encouragement, or just that little spark you needed to keep you moving forward in your own legacy journey. If you got value from today's episode, please take a second to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone else who's building something that matters. And if you're ready to take that next step, protecting your business, planning for retirement, or passing on your legacy with purpose, head to legacyprotectors.life to schedule a conversation. Until next time, I'm your host, David Gravelle, reminding you to stay curious, stay committed, and keep building something worth passing on.